Welcome. My name is Dr. Deborah Joy Perez, Assistant Vice President for Research and Evaluation at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Welcome to the Diversity Matters podcast series. Diversity and inclusion are core values of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, reflected in our principles. We value differences among individuals across multiple dimensions, including, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, religion, and socioeconomic status. We believe that the more we include diverse perspectives and experiences in our work, the better able we are to help all Americans live healthier lives and get the care they need. In service to our mission, we pledge to promote these values in the work we do and to reflect on our progress regularly. Now I'd like to introduce you to the podcast host, Jacinta Gauda, who is the Diversity Liaison for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Human Capital team.
Hello, I'm Jacinta Gauda, your host for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Diversity Matters podcast series. In these conversations, we talk with funders and grant makers, leaders and experts about practical ways of recruiting candidates from underrepresented groups to fellowships, scholars programs, and positions within philanthropy. I invite all of our listeners to join the conversation on diversity and inclusion by becoming a member of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Diversity Matters online community. Our guest today is Dr. Jacquelyn Campbell, National Director of the Robert Wood Johnson Nurse Faculty Scholars Program. Nurse Faculty Scholars focuses on developing the next generation of national leaders in academic nursing. Now in its fifth year, 66 outstanding junior faculty members have become members of this selected prestigious program. Today, we will talk to Dr. Campbell about the importance of diversity and inclusion within NFS and about some of the initiatives she developed that are designed to attract candidates from underrepresented groups. Dr. Campbell will talk about what it took to recruit the 3 scholars from underrepresented groups who are among the successful 2012 applicants. Dr. Campbell, welcome to Diversity Matters.
I'm delighted to be here.
Dr. Campbell, tell us a little bit about the Nurse Faculty Scholars Program.
Robert Wood Johnson Foundation created the Nurse Faculty Scholars Program as part of their overall initiative to address the nursing shortage, especially the shortage of professional nurses in the United States. And this is a chronic systemic shortage that waxes and wanes, but it is a real issue for all of healthcare. And in order to increase the number of baccalaureate-prepared nurses in this country, it was well recognized that we needed to recruit, retain the very best of nursing faculty in order to do this. And so the Nurse Faculty Scholars Program was created in order to allow and facilitate promising academic nurses to become those nurse leaders amongst faculty. And the particular award provides funding for research, leadership training, and a protected time to lay the basis for this career in academic nursing so that these young scholars can become leaders and will stay in academic nursing, will recruit and retain excellent nursing students.
Thank you. As National Program Director, Dr. Campbell, you see a focus on diversity and inclusion as central to the mission of NFS. Tell us why this is among your top priorities.
Well, it's clear to everyone that, unfortunately, in professional nursing, in the nursing profession in general, there is a shortage of diverse members of the profession from diverse backgrounds. And the entire nursing profession feels that it's absolutely mandatory that our nurses reflect the communities and the populations that they serve. And so therefore we need to be able to recruit and retain qualified nursing students from diverse backgrounds. And in order to do that kind of recruitment, it's been well demonstrated that the faculty needs to be diverse, that students need to see people like themselves succeeding, being leaders in the schools of nursing. And so therefore we feel like these leaders that we are training through the Nurse Faculty Scholar Program also need to be diverse. And even if they don't come from underrepresented groups themselves, they need to be committed to diversity amongst the faculty of their school and amongst the student body.
Tell me a little bit more about that. You've been quite innovative in your efforts to increase representation in the program, and your commitment goes beyond representation in recruitment and the importance of having a diversity orientation. You've told me in the past, particularly among those who themselves are not from underrepresented groups. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, we are deeply committed to the notion that we need to have the most qualified potential leaders in nursing from all kinds of backgrounds. And so therefore the applicants need to be drawn from the broadest recruitment pool possible. So we want to make sure, and it's a long-term kind of project and it's one that you have to continually work at, that our applicant pool is from all kinds of backgrounds and that all of the applicant pool have an equally good chance of obtaining or actually gaining that Nurse Faculty Scholar Award. So we have used particular strategies to find them and recruit them from different backgrounds, and also, as I mentioned, even if they are not from underrepresented group themselves, that they have that commitment to have that diversity in their School of Nursing and amongst the faculty of their School of Nursing.
Dr. Campbell, we'll get back to the details around some of your recruitment strategies, but let's talk a little bit about how you reinforce the fact that diversity and inclusion is a value for the program itself.
We've actually developed one of our selection criteria, one of the criteria by which we evaluate our applicants, that there is a commitment to diversity by the applicant, and we actually evaluate each applicant at the extent of that commitment. They may have demonstrated that by actually recruiting students from a diverse background themselves. They may have demonstrated that by being on a committee that works on those issues. There's a variety of ways that they can have demonstrated that commitment, and that's part of what we look at when we look at the applicants to the program. And so we also provide leadership around those issues from a high level, not just in terms of how you can think about recruiting people from diverse backgrounds yourself, but how you can make sure that that whole commitment is part of your school, is part of your leadership commitment, and even as part of the university commitment and the kinds of strategies. So we actually have sessions, leadership training sessions, on how you think about that from an institutional level.
Dr. Campbell, thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges? We're going to talk a little later about some of the specific efforts that you've taken, but talk about the challenges of attracting academic leaders in nursing from underrepresented groups and how you have addressed some of those challenges.
Well, one of the big challenges is that since we require a PhD in nursing as the basic foundational eligibility requirement, that we find that unfortunately nurses from underrepresented backgrounds are also underrepresented as PhDs in nursing and in PhD programs. So part of our responsibility is to think about presenting the idea of the Nurse Faculty Scholar Award early in the PhD program to actually be sure that we're talking about this to various groups that have a number of PhDs or PhD students from underrepresented backgrounds, that we are careful to include, for instance, deans from minority-serving institutions so that they're very aware of our commitment to this issue and very aware that we really want to help applicants from those schools be successful. Those deans orchestrate the process of the applications, and so we make sure that the deans know early on that we're very interested in faculty from those schools and that we're going to provide them and the applicants with the tools to help them prepare their application. We want to make sure that these applicants are absolutely competitive, that their applications are the best they could be. And so we developed a webinar for those deans that's available on the Nurse Faculty Scholar website and can be viewed by anyone. But we particularly put it on and alert the deans from the minority-serving institutions and other institutions that are less research-intensive, and but a lot of them have a high proportion of faculty that are from underrepresented groups. And forging these relationships with the deans pays off in terms of knowledge about the program and recruiting opportunities. And we're constantly working to deepen those ties with deans. We've talked to deans from minority-serving schools of nursing about how we can do a better job of both talking about the program, making sure that people know the program's available, and making sure that we're continually improving our efforts in this regard.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Let's look at 2012. This cohort is successful. It has scholars from 3 underrepresented groups. Tell us more about what it took to recruit these 3 faculty members.
We do feel very good about the fact that the 2012, the most recent cohort, includes scholars from Native American, African American, and Hispanic groups. While each of the recruitment stories are different, there's some very common elements. First of all, leadership was involved. Secondly, it's a process that happens over time. And third, it's all about building relationships. So let me talk about each of those very briefly. First of all, in terms of leadership, we absolutely work through the deans, as I mentioned before. They are real leaders. We also work through our National Advisory Committee. We have on our National Advisory Committee a Native American who's been very important because there's an especially acute shortage of PhD nurses amongst Native Americans. He also works with developing researchers from Native American communities, so he's been invaluable in identifying potential nurse faculty scholars through that avenue. We also work through leadership of different organizations like the Black Nurses Organization, it's Black Nurses Association. That is another arena where potential scholars from the African American groups oftentimes gather, and we go to that conference and we're a presence at that conference. It's also a process that happens over time. It's a long-term effort, and we start working with PhD students, not just actual junior faculty members. We make sure that they know about the program early on in their own development. We work over time to make sure that we have this presence at various places. We make sure that our materials reflect our nurse faculty scholars from different underrepresented groups. And in nursing, that includes men, so that the materials that we bring to conference, the materials on our website, include photographs that we have taken over time. And third, it's all about building relationships. It's all about working with people like those deans of minority-serving institutions over time. It's all about working with our own scholars who are from a variety of different backgrounds to help them help recruit for us and with us. And we don't want to put pressure on them. It's not all about them. We're going to work with them, and all of us are going to work on this issue. But they're oftentimes the most effective recruiters for the program. It's very important that potential scholars see a successful scholar that looks like them, that is those one-to-one relationships, not only between myself and potential scholars, but also between our own scholars and potential applicants to the program.
Thank you. You mentioned the way you worked with your National Advisory Committee, and I believe our listeners would be very interested in knowing how members of councils and advisory groups, board members, can help with diversity and inclusion. Do you have any particular way of working with members of your National Advisory Committee when it comes to the diversity effort?
Well, we have very deliberately, from the beginning, made sure that our National Advisory Committee are from diverse backgrounds themselves, and then that the other members of the National Advisory Committee share the program's diversity values, so that everyone is enthusiastic and committed to this improving the diversity of our applicants and of our scholars. Everyone understands why this is important and how it will help the program carry on its mission. We actually have a subcommittee on the National Advisory Committee for recruitment and specifically for increasing the diversity of the applicant pool. And they think hard about this issue and help us make sure that our programming is responsive to this. And each of the NAC members who are from underrepresented backgrounds helps to recruit from within their organizations and their worlds.
Thank you. Thank you very much for telling us more about how you work with your National Advisory Committee, and this will be helpful for our listeners. You also mentioned the importance of giving the candidate confidence in the process. What kinds of personal, technical, or professional support can be helpful in this regard?
We offer webinars for the candidates, and we help them to understand what is required and how their applications can be competitive. We also provide a lessons learned webinar for candidates who are not successful, and we talk about issues that came up generically in the applications and the interviews and give them feedback on the process and invite them to apply the next year if they are still eligible. We remind potential candidates about the webinars, and we remind them to get started early, which helps them work through the process. We know that at least 2 candidates from minority backgrounds were rejected on the first application, went through the lessons learned and the analysis process, applied again, and were accepted. So we know that that's a potential way to go and can be very helpful to the scholars.
Thank you. We're coming to a close of today's conversation, Dr. Campbell, and as we do you have any advice for funders or grant makers or other leaders who are trying to reshape their recruiting efforts in order to increase the numbers of candidates from underrepresented groups?
As I mentioned, you want to make sure that the public image of the program, the materials, the presentations, the web presence, the commitments, the eligibility criteria, the selection criteria is an image of diversity, and we've worked really hard to make sure we have fabulous photographs of our scholars doing their research in the community, and that we highlight scholars from all the different backgrounds in those photographs. Secondly, diversity messages have to come from the top. Again, we have to engage the NAC in a very deliberate manner in doing this. All of our staff and our scholars need to be aware that this is a first-order commitment of the program. When I interview people for our office here, I make sure that they are absolutely committed to this issue as much as I am. That's one of the criteria I look for when I talk to potential applicants for the support office. And then finally, you have to take the long view and keep working at it. You can be very happy when one group is diverse, but you have to keep working on it for the long term. and make sure that the program has that kind of reputation, that it considers this very carefully, and it has to continually be part of all the recruitment efforts.
Dr. Campbell, on behalf of all of the members of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Diversity Matters online community, thank you for your valuable insights and for sharing with us how Nurse Faculty Scholars is working to increase diversity and inclusion among its scholars.
I was delighted to be a part of it. Thank you.
I'm Jacinta Gauda, inviting all listeners and members of the Diversity Matters community to join the conversation. You can download this podcast or request a one-page summary of today's discussion. You can post your comments and questions, as well as tips about diversity and inclusion measures that have been helpful within your organization. And if you've been listening to this podcast and are not a member of the Diversity Matters community, please take a moment to join today at rwjf.org/community/diversity matters so that you can participate in the conversation. I'd like to remind all of our listeners to sign up for notifications of our next podcast in this series on practical ways to increase diversity and inclusion within philanthropy.